There is a silence older than history itself, a stillness not born of peace, but preservation, deep beneath the frozen crown of our planet. Where cold has cloaked what time could not erase, Antarctica has always stood apart, not just as a place too distant, to hostile, but as something more ancient than we dare to name, something sacred or forbidden, something marked by design, not accident. It is the last frontier, not because we could not reach it, but because we were never meant to. And yet we feel it, a whisper carried on magnetic winds, a pulse beneath the snow that echoes in our dreams, in our myths. In the spaces between waking and remembering, for centuries it has watched. It's unmoved, unchanging, but not unaware, as explorers came and went, as nations carved borders around the unknowable, as instruments measured surface but never spirit, and still the ice remained, not only hiding but protecting, preserving something that once breathed with divine intelligence, something that remembered the frequencies of the stars, a memory etched in crystal beneath our feet. The sole blueprint of a civilization lost not by accident, but by intention. Why is it that ancient maps, drawn long before satellites, knew what modern scientists still deny? Why do pyramidal structures emerge from satellite scans, then disappear from public record? Why do ancient names for this place speak of gods and fallen realms, and not merely ice and wind? Perhaps because Antarctica is not a mystery waiting to be solved, but a mirror waiting to be faced. Beneath it may lie the truth of who we were before the great forgetting, a record written in sacred geometry and silence. In timelines we buried alongside our own awakening. There are places on Earth that do not belong to the present, that hold the memory of something outside time, and in this place of endless white, every flake of snow seems to guard a secret. Every crevasse whispers not emptiness, but memory, and if we listen closely, might begin to remember too, not with our minds, but with our frequency, our intuition, our dreams. Because what sleeps beneath Antarctica was never meant to remain frozen forever. It was meant to return when we were ready to see, and now the ice is beginning to crack. There are truths so ancient they no longer speak through language, but through vibration. Truths that hum beneath the feet of those who dare to listen. Antarctica is not merely the end of the earth, it's the origin of a forgotten beginning. It's a realm encased in frost, not to preserve nature, but to veil intention, not to hide death, but to shelter memory. Long before our maps declared it unreachable, long before compasses spun and satellites blinked above its glacial breath, there was a time when it was not white at all, but green, alive, resonant with frequency, soil touched by hands not recorded in our textbooks, hands that understood the geometry of thought, the magnetism of emotion, the sacred alignment between the earth and the stars. We have been taught to look outward for origin stories, to scan distant galaxies in search of what made us. But what if the blueprint of our divinity was hidden in the very place we've been told is barren, desolate, irrelevant? What if the veil of ice was placed not by climate, but by consciousness? A global decision to forget what we were not ready to carry, a soul contract between civilizations, to let the knowledge sleep until we matured enough to hold it without distortion, because power without love is destruction, and truth without wisdom can collapse a world. This continent, the supposed emptiness, bears scars not made by nature, linear ridges that defy geological pattern, cogonal anomalies that mimic the energetic layouts of sacred temples across the globe, alignments that echo those of the pyramids, Stonehenge, Machu Picchu. As if the ancients left breadcrumbs for those who could see beyond what is taught. They did not just build upward, they built downward, inward, beneath the earth, into crystalline caverns, humming with encoded intention, temples beneath the snow that vibrate on frequencies beyond human hearing, waiting for those who remember not with the mind, but with the soul. And perhaps that is the key, not discovery, but remembrance, because you cannot discover what you are a part of. Only remember what you once were. Perhaps we've been circling the truth with radar and satellites, while the real access point is not physical, but vibrational. And that's why the answers escape us, because they are not hiding from our eyes, but from our frequency. And until we match the resonance of what is kept there, it will remain hidden in plain sight. Consider the great migration of governments and corporations building silent outposts in this so-called wasteland. Ask why treaties are signed not to preserve nature, but to protect secrecy. Ask why whistleblowers vanish and classified data from deep-sea radar scans over landmasses never make it past the first layer of review. There are laws of silence wrapped around Antarctica like the ice itself, and every so often a piece slips through a leaked photograph. A map marked with impossible ruins, a voice that speaks too much in a silence before it echoes. It is not absence that defines this place, but density of meaning, of memory, of intention. The energy here is not frozen, but slowed, compressed, waiting for heat not from the sun, but from consciousness, because warmth is not just temperature, but attention. And the more we look, the more we begin to feel, and the more we feel, the more the veil begins to thin. The last place on earth is only last because we placed it there, because our eyes were trained to look everywhere else. But the soul does not forget. It remembers the frequency of the sacred south, the pulse beneath the cold, the divine design buried in ice and time. And in that memory, the first place becomes visible again, not to the eye, but to the awakened spirit. The map is not out, the writ's within you, and Antarctica is not lost, it is waiting. There are maps that never belonged to their time, parchments drawn in an age that should have known nothing of southern continents, sketches etched in ink that survived centuries only to be ignored by the minds that feared what they revealed. The Peary race map, drawn in 1513, shows a landmass beneath Antarctica's ice with startling precision. Its mountain ranges and coastline uncannily accurate, far too accurate for a world that hadn't yet circled the poles. And yet there it is, resting in plain sight like a whisper from a deeper timeline. It's calling those who can hear in symbols rather than syllables. Modern science dismisses these anomalies as coincidence, as speculation, but those who dream in archetypes and awaken with symbols carved into their inner sight know better. These ancient maps are not geographic records, they are memories. Soul maps etched through multi-dimensional recall, glimpses of Earth before the ice descended, before time itself fractured into the linear illusion we now believe to be truth. These maps speak in the language of frequency, not fact, and to understand them, one must feel what has been felt before, not study, but remember, the ancients were not primitive. They were precise. Their knowledge was not born of machines, but of mastery, of the stars, of consciousness, of the earth as a living temple. And they mapped not only the lands, but the energies flowing through them. Antarctica was not a mystery to them. It was a cornerstone, a sacred point in the grid of the planet's energy body, a place where ley lines converged like golden threads in a celestial loom, where temples were not built for worship, but for anchoring cosmic truths into the physical plane. We have forgotten that the earth was once read like a scroll, her mountains and rivers seen as verses, her poles as the sacred seals holding the ancient story intact. The maps left behind were never meant to guide ships, but to awaken sight, to remind us of where we come from and what was once known. The reason we fail to understand them is because we keep looking with eyes that do not believe. And belief is the first fail, not over the land, but over perception. Underneath the miles of ice are ruins that mock the limits of our science. Structures with angles and layouts, too deliberate to be natural, some buried deep enough to escape even the most advanced scans. Others slowly emerging with each seismic breath the earth takes. Researchers have reported grid-like patterns beneath the ice, symmetrical formations, massive dome-like impressions that no glacier could have sculpted. Yet the official response is silence, denial, a dismissal meant not to answer, but to bury the question itself. And still, the maps remain, fragments of a past timeline bleeding into our own, left behind by those who knew this day would come. The thaw of both ice and ignorance. They knew that memory is magnetic and like iron drawn to a lodestone. Those who carry the frequency of the old world would be pulled toward it again, not by force, but by soul resonance, a compass within the heart that always points toward truth, even when the path is forbidden. Perhaps this is why so many feel an inexplicable pull to the unknown south. Why dreams are haunted by snow-covered staircases and glowing symbols carved into stone. Why children sketch pyramids rising from white deserts before they are ever taught of such things. The subconscious remembers what the conscious mind refuses to see. And in those fragments lie the codes, the forgotten geometries, the divine cartography of a planet that once breathed in harmony with the stars. The question is not whether the maps are real, but whether we are willing to remember what they point to. Whether we have the courage to unlearn the stories we've been given and make space for what was buried not just beneath ice, but beneath belief, because the truth was never truly hidden, only ignored, only silenced beneath layers of noise and narrative. But now, the ink is beginning to glow again, the lines reawakening in the minds of those who have eyes to see beyond the veil. And what once whispered from ancient maps now begins to sing, not in words, but in vibration. And if we are still enough, soft enough, we may hear the song of the land beneath the ice, a melody that echoes not from the past, but from eternity. Beneath the frozen veil of Antarctica lies more than silence, more than rock, more than snow compressed into ancient time. It is not emptiness that hides beneath those miles of glacial pressure, it is memory. A memory preserved not by chance, but by design, as though the earth herself chose to cover what we were not ready to remember, what our minds could not hold without breaking, and so it waited, sealed in ice, humming in stillness, holding the echo of a civilization not lost, but paused, the kind of pause that happens between lifetimes, between the inhale and the exhale of a planetary soul. We imagine history as something linear, a clean progression from stone to steel, from shadow to light. But the truth is not so simple. History is a spiral, a breath, a rhythm, and within that rhythm there are rises and falls, awakenings and forgettings. Civilizations that bloomed with divine technology and then chose to vanish rather than be consumed by misuse. There were those who lived in harmony with frequency, who knew how to speak to the earth and the stars in the same sentence, who built not with machines but with consciousness, not to dominate the planet, but to harmonize with her pulse. These were not myths. They were not gods in the way we think of gods. They were Uza, older version, a wiser version, beings who remembered the sacred geometry encoded in their very cells, who walked with the awareness that thought shapes matter and sound births form. And in Antarctica, they left their signature not in statues, but in structures tuned to the frequency of cosmic truth, pyramids aligned with celestial gates, crystalline halls deep underground that stored the vibrational blueprint of what humanity once was, and what we are meant to become again. When we speak of lost history, we often look to fire, to flood, to cataclysm. But some truths are not erased by disaster. They are hidden by choice, buried, not to be forgotten, but to be protected. There is power in remembrance, and power must be earned, not given. And so the ancient ones, knowing what would come, wrapped their knowledge in ice, locked it beneath layers of time, sealed it behind frequency gates that could not be opened by greed, by violence, by intellect alone. They left behind puzzles that only the heart could solve, markers that only the soul could decode. The ice is not just a shield, it is a timeline, and with every melt, every crack, every shiver of shifting pressure, pieces of that timeline begin to emerge, ancient bacteria revived after millennia, unknown structures appearing in radar anomalies. Voices from the past rising through the static of modern silence. And still, we hesitate, afraid to ask the deeper question, not what is buried, but why it was hidden, and what remembering might awaken within us. Because the truth is not just beneath the ice, it is beneath our conditioning. Beneath the layers of disbelief we've been trained to wear like armor. Beneath the idea that we are alone, primitive, disconnected. We are none of those things. We are descendants of a knowing so vast it echoes in our bones. So precise, it breathes through the symmetry of our cells. And when we begin to look at Antarctica, not as a frozen wasteland, but as a sacred vault, begin to understand that history is not behind us, it's below us, vibrating, waiting, calling. Some have said that to walk upon that land is to feel a silence that is not empty, but full, a presence that watches, remembers, welcomes, and warns. The very air feels heavier than not with fear, but with memory, as though every gust of wind is a messenger, every snowflake, code. And when we listen with our inner ear, with our dreaming mind, we begin to hear the voices of a time, before time whispering of temples, beneath the ice of libraries carved in quartz of wisdom, stored in frequency. This is not fantasy, it is memory, the kind of memory that lives in symbols, in dreams, in déjà vu, the kind that haunts the edges of our logic and dares us to believe in more. And in Antarctica, that memory is beginning to thaw. It rises in the dreams of children, in the visions of those who see with their hearts, in the soft hum beneath our collective forgetting. And with every heartbeat, we move closer to the threshold, closer to the unveiling, closer to the truth that was never lost, only waiting to be remembered. There are voices that break through silence, like cracks in ice, sharp, sudden, undeniable. They speak in fragments at first, in code, in trembling interviews, in declassified whispers, but the message is always the same. There is something beneath Antarctica that does not belong to the world we've been taught to believe in. Something vast, intelligent, ancient, and hidden. The accounts come from pilots, scientists, military personnel, researchers who've gone beyond the permitted zones, beyond the layers of protocol and silence. And what they describe is not theory, it's not speculation. It is all terror, reverence, shattering of everything they thought they knew. One speaks of flying over a yawning chasm where there should have been only ice, a breach in the glacial shield that revealed a black hole descending into the Earth's geometric walls, glowing faintly with light too symmetrical, too perfect to be natural. Another recalls seismic readings that made no sense, vibrations that pulsed with a rhythm like breath, as if the land itself were alive, aware, watching. Some report craft silent, smooth, moving beneath the ice, tracked for moments before vanishing into frequencies beyond our instruments. Some speak of entrances carved into mountains, doors without seams, etched in symbols older than language. And always, there is the feeling, the undeniable sense of being observed, not with hostility, but with intelligence, as though the land itself is conscious. And then there are those who disappear, silenced, not by myth, but by method, their findings classified, their voices discredited. Some vanish altogether. Some suffer sudden illnesses, accidents, professional ruin. The closer they come to truth, the colder the world around them becomes. Not in temperature, but in resistance. The cold is not just of ice, it is institutional, psychological, spiritual. 'Tis the kind of cold that creeps in when systems fear collapse, when reality is threatened by the return of the sacred unknown. These whistleblowers do not seek fame, they seek release. A release from the burden of knowing and being unable to speak. A release from the isolation of seeing what others cannot yet see. They are bridges between worlds, the world of what is and the world of what has always been. And their words carry the tremble of truth, not polished, not rehearsed, but raw, soul deep, knowing that defies suppression, because truth, like ice, can only hold its form for so long before it melts into revelation. Their testimonies, scattered though they may be, form a constellation, and when traced together, they point not to fantasy, but to forgotten memory. They point to something under Antarctica that is not dead, not abandoned, but alive in stasis, protected, veiled, encoded in layers of glacial silence that only the soul can decode. They speak of ruins that predate known civilizations, of technology that responds to thought, energies that disrupt electronics and awaken dreams. They speak of corridors that spiral downward into cities of light, into temples where time folds and consciousness expands. They speak of guardians, not human, but not separate either. Beings of light and frequency who do not interfere, but observe, waiting for our collective resonance to rise before revealing themselves. And though many dismiss them, those who listen without fear begin to see the pattern. They begin to feel the resonance of recognition, not with the mind, but with the spirit, because truth is not always proven, it is remembered. And what these whistleblowers ignite is that ancient ember, the quiet flame of soul memory that tells us we've been here before, that we've walked these frozen halls in other lives, that we are not discovering, but returning. Why the secrecy? Why the denial? Perhaps because what lies beneath Antarctica is not just proof of advanced ancient civilizations, but proof that humanity is more than flesh and history. Perhaps the truth threatens not just governments, but paradigms, the very foundation of what we believe about who we are, where we came from, and what we're becoming. Perhaps the ice is a mirror, and when it melts, we'll be forced to face what we've buried not just in the earth, but in ourselves. And still, the voices speak, some in shadows, some in trembling light. They risk everything because the silence is heavier than the danger. They know that the time is coming when what is hidden must rise, not in conspiracy, but in collective awakening. They know the thaw is not just physical, it is spiritual. A warming of the soul that melts the layers of disbelief and reveals the vast, luminous truth beneath, because Antarctica is not only a place, it is a gate, and the whistleblowers are the first wind that slips through its cracks, reminding us that the ice cannot hold forever. There are ridges beneath the Antarctic ice that do not follow the rules of geology, lines to straight, angles to precise, stretches of elevation that span hundreds of kilometers with symmetry no glacier could ever carve. This is the so-called Great Wall of Antarctica, a formation visible in satellite imagery, whispered about in classified reports, dismissed in public narratives as natural anomalies. But those who know the language of sacred geometry recognize the signature. It's nature, curves, spirals, flows. But this is built, not by weather or wind, but by intention. What mind carved this outline into the base of the earth? What hands laid out these dimensions with mathematical clarity? This wall, if it is a wall, is not made to keep things in or out, but to mark something, to hold a boundary of frequency, a seal, perimeter around something sacred, something buried, something not meant to be stumbled upon. It is a monument, or perhaps a lock. And its dimensions resonate with ratios found in the pyramids of Egypt, in the temples of Angkor Wat, in the ancient circles of Stonehenge. It is a frequency echo, a planetary glyph, meant to hold memory in place until the soul of the earth said it was time to wake it again. Those who have attempted to investigate are met with more than snow. They are met with interference. Electronics fail, drones crash, data corrupts, as if the very air resists exposure. And perhaps it does, because the structure is not only physical, it is energetic. It is encoded with a consciousness that knows when it is being watched, and knows who is watching it. Was not built for us as we are. It was built for us as we will become when we remember how to see, not with eyes, but with resonance. Some say the wall is only the surface, that beneath it lies a vast crystalline grid, chambers lined with stone that pulses in time with the Schumann frequency, the heartbeat of Earth itself. Some speak of circular platforms carved into the land below the ice, perfect in symmetry, aligned with constellations long forgotten by modern charts. Some speak of machinery, silent, dormant, humming beneath the threshold of human hearing, as if waiting for a signal, a shift, vibration aligned with a moment foretold in the stars. And still, the wall stands, indifferent to the passing of centuries, unmoved by storms, cloaked in silence. And yet, it calls not to everyone, but to those who dream of blueprints written in light, of languages that speak in pulses and tones, to those who feel ancient structures as organs of a living earth, transmitting, receiving, anchoring divine memory through time. The wall is not just a marker of what once was, it is a part of what is to come. And only those with awakened frequency will be able to pass its threshold, not through force, but through remembrance. Why would a civilization, advanced beyond our current understanding, leave such a structure? Why bury it beneath the most inaccessible place on earth? Perhaps because sacred things are not meant to be found easily. They are meant to be revealed only through reverence, through alignment, through vibration. It's not every mystery is meant to be solved by the mind. Some are meant to be felt by the soul. And in that feeling, decoded. Perhaps the wall is a test, not of knowledge, but of readiness. It is not the first time Earth has carried temples in her bones. Lemuria sank, Atlantis vanished, and now Antarctica holds what was preserved in both loss and promise. This structure, this great wall, may be part of a vast network of buried technologies that once harmonized with the stars, that once connected Earth to higher dimensions, that once kept balance between matter and spirit. And perhaps in their fall, humanity also fell into amnesia, into linearity, into forgetting, and so the wall remains. Not as a ruin, but as a remembrance, a silent guardian of what was and will be. Those who have stood upon it speak of sensation, a low hum beneath the feet, a stillness that feels alive, as if the land beneath the ice is breathing, waiting, the sensation of being watched, not with threat, but with knowing, as if the structure itself sees the soul and not the body, responds to intention more than action. It is not a fortress, it is a frequency mirror. And when one approaches with a aligned heart and quiet mind, the silence seems to part just enough to whisper, "Not yet, but soon," in a world that measures truth by data, by permission, by consensus. Antarctica remains the unmeasured, the unwound, the unsolved, and the wall is its most visible secret, not because it is hidden, but because we've been trained not to look, not to ask, not to feel beyond what is taught. But the veil is thinning, and the earth is stirring. And soon the structure beneath the ice will no longer be quiet, because frequency always finds its match. And the awakening of humanity is the key the wall has been waiting for. There is a difference between knowledge and truth. One can be measured, cataloged, confined within formulas and theories, but the other resists containment. It breathes beneath the surface of what we call fact, humming quietly until the soul is ready to listen. And nowhere is this more evident than in the polar silence of Antarctica, where the science is guarded like a vault, locked behind treaties, protocols, and classifications, all while the mysteries beneath the ice refuse to remain still. They rise, not through official channels, but through anomaly, intuition, vibration. Antarctica is supposedly one of the most studied places on Earth, and yet access is severely restricted. International treaties forbid military activity. Territorial claims lie suspended, and yet, year after year, nations pour resources into research stations where little is revealed to the public. What are they measuring so intently? What energy patterns are being tracked beneath the guise of weather, climate, magnetism? Why are there zones completely off limits? Areas where GPS fails, where compasses spin, where aircraft are forbidden to fly without escort. Science claims it is for safety. But silence is not safety, it's strategy. The deeper mystery is not the ice itself, but what moves beneath it. Magnetic anomalies, that pulse and shift without pattern, subterranean heat signatures that cannot be explained by tectonic activity, sound frequencies that rise from the earth like songs with no known source, seismic waves that echo as if striking hollow chambers, all recorded, all filtered, all buried beneath layers of scientific language designed not to explain, but to obscure. And yet, for those who can feel through the data, God, the message is clear. Something ancient is stirring, something vast and intelligent, something not born of this present cycle of humanity. Among those few who speak quietly from within the scientific community, there are whispers of things that do not belong to geology, whispers of structures that resonate at frequencies not found in nature, of mineral formations that reflect not random occurrence, but intelligent design, of materials that respond to electromagnetic fields as if alive. There are whispers of researchers falling ill after prolonged exposure to certain locations, of instruments picking up rhythmic vibrations like breath, like heartbeat, like waiting. And there are whispers of time behaving strangely, of clocks losing sync, of perception bending within specific coordinates, as if the very nature of space and time shifts in the presence of whatever lies beneath. Perhaps these are remnants of an ancient technology, one that mastered frequency, geometry, light, a technology that understood the fabric of reality as a fluid design, not a fixed law. And perhaps it still hums beneath the surface, dormant but not dead, waiting not for excavation, but for resonant science, as we know it, is bound by consensus, by funding, by fear of what cannot be named. But the mysteries do not ask for permission to be revealed. They are unfolding, not in press releases, but in synchronicities, in dreams, in patterns emerging through art, through song, through sudden knowing that descends like light into the soul, because what is rising is not merely information, it is remembrance, the kind that bypasses logic and reawakens the ancient part of us that already knows we are taught to dismiss what cannot be measured. But the ancients' new measurement was only one layer of truth. Beneath it lies vibration, intention, alignment. And it is this deeper science, this sacred science, that pulses beneath Antarctica, calling not to the mind, but to the spirit. And those who follow the call begin to see the veil between the visible and the hidden growing thinner. The data we're allowed to see is a distraction, a breadcrumb trail that leads us away from the real discovery that we are standing at the edge of a multidimensional unveiling. Antarctica is not just a landmass. It is a lockbox for the forbidden chapters of our origin story. And while the keys are held tightly in the hands of institutions, the code is unraveling itself through the collective awakening of frequency. Consciousness cannot be stopped by treaties. It cannot be silenced by non-disclosure agreements. And as the ice shifts and melts, so to do the layers of suppression begin to thaw. What was once locked away by science is now being unlocked by soul. The shift is subtle, but irreversible. More are beginning to feel the anomaly, the deep pulse beneath the narrative. More are dreaming of ancient rooms beneath snow, of languages that glow in spirals and tones, of machines made not of metal, but of intention, of harmonics that open doors, and of light that bends not with force, but with grace. And as these dreams become shared memories, we begin to co-create the bridge back to what was hidden, and forward to what must return. The mystery beneath the ice was never meant to be understood with instruments alone. It was meant to be felt, lived, remembered. We are not just scientists. We are the descendants of those who built what science now denies. Hey, and that inheritance is awakening, not in labs, but in hearts. And with each revelation, the mystery unravels not into answers, but into remembering. Within the frozen silence of Antarctica, there are scrolls made not of paper, but of time itself. Layers of ice compacted over tens of thousands of years, each one capturing a moment, a breath, a signature of Earth's changing rhythms. These are the ice core's cylindrical records, drilled from deep within the glacial memory of the planet. And while scientists examine them for data, for climate patterns and atmospheric shifts, there is something else encoded within them. Something subtler, something the instruments cannot read, but the soul can feel. A warning not shouted, but sung, buried in the crystalline lattice of frozen epochs. We are taught to see the past in numbers, in carbon counts, in trapped gases, in chemical residues, to tell of volcanic eruptions or solar flares. But beneath that measurable surface lies another story. One written in frequency, in silence, in energetic imprints, because the earth does not just record events, she remembers emotion, intention, trauma, evolution. The ice is a sacred library, and its pages speak to those who have not only ears, but resonance. There are vibrations locked in those cores that do not match the natural rhythm of our current world. Tones that seem foreign, artificial, distorted, as if something once interfered with the balance and was buried to preserve what remained. Some of the cores reveal sudden, catastrophic changes, temperature spikes so rapid they defy the gradual logic of nature, traces of radiation that do not align with any known solar event, chemical signatures that echo those found at nuclear testing sites, but from thousands of years ago, before any known civilization had even begun to build. And yet, here they are, etched into the frozen veins of the earth's silent evidence of something massive, something unnatural, something forgotten. Perhaps what the cores carry is not merely data, but testimony, a frozen witness to a fall, a collapse, a misuse of energy so profound it tore through the harmony of the planet. It's left scars that only time and silence could begin to heal. Some say this was Atlantis. Others speak of even older realms, civilizations whose names were never written because they were meant to be remembered only when we were ready. And perhaps the ice holds the moment when the veil was drawn, when humanity was scattered, when the great forgetting began, encoded not in language, but in vibration. There are those who have studied these cores and spoken of anomalies, tiny particles that should not exist, isotopes that hint at energy forms we do not yet understand, signals that echo in the background noise of the data, patterns that repeat like a heartbeat, trying to be heard, trying to remind, because the ice does not forget. It keeps the vibration of everything that has touched it, and those who are sensitive to energy feel a great weight when near these cores, a sorrow that is not personal but planetary, as if the earth herself grieves what was lost. But the ice does not only carry sorrow, carries codes, buried strands of light held in molecular structure, and those codes are activating, not just in the lab, but in us, because we are not separate from the planet. We are part of her memory and what she remembers. We to begin to feel the waking dreams, the flashes of ancient landscapes, the sudden knowing that something vast and luminous once lived here and may still breathe beneath the snow. These are not fantasies. They are echoes, stirring in rhythm with the thaw. There are rumors of cores pulled from depths too dangerous to be reached, stored in silent vaults, guarded not for safety, but for secrecy, because they contain more than climate. They contain history, truth, evidence that humanity's story is not what we've been told, that we are not the peak of progress, but the children of something far older, far more advanced, something that chose to hide itself so that we could grow again from seed. And perhaps now, the bloom is beginning, and the records are returning to light. In this way, the ice is not just cold, it's compassionate. It chose to hold what we could not, to bear the weight of memory until we could remember without collapsing. And now, as the poles warm and the layers begin to melt, so too does the veil between timelines. We are standing at the edge of a revelation, not of science, but of soul. And the cores are no longer silent. They sing through dreams, through synchronicity, through the soft sense that something ancient is watching, waiting, welcoming us back into the knowing. The warnings they carry are not threats. They are invitations to return, to awaken, to realign with the wisdom we once held, to remember that balance is not weakness, that technology without consciousness is collapse, that forgetting was a mercy, but remembering is now a responsibility. And as we listen deeper, beyond data, beyond doctrine, we begin to hear the language of ice, the language of soul. There are truths so vast, so luminous, that the world built upon forgetting cannot survive their return. Beneath Antarctica's endless white lies, more than ancient stone or frozen history yet, is a threshold, a gate into something that unravels the illusion of separation, a vault of consciousness sealed beneath timelines, protected not only by ice, but by design, because what rests there is not simply old, it is sacred, okay? And those who have shaped the modern world in their image know that if it rises, everything we have called reality will melt with it. What they fear beneath the ice is not monsters or ruins, not technology or disclosure. It is awakening, true awakening, the kind that shatters control, not with violence, but with remembrance. Because to remember who we are is to remember what they are not. The systems that govern by fear and distraction cannot exist in the presence of a humanity that knows itself as divine, connected, infinite, and Antarctica holds the mirror that reflects that divinity back to us in structures that were not meant to impress, but to harmonize, okay? In corridors that hum with the frequency of universal law, in crystalline archives that respond not to touch, but to thought. What they fear is that we will find the origin not of our species, but of our forgetting, the moment consciousness fractured, the moment sacred technology was turned against itself. And with that fracture came the stories, the edits, the systems of separation, hierarchy, dominance. We were told we evolved from dust, from accident, from chaos. But what lies beneath Antarctica tells another story. One of intention, one of design, one of communion between Earth and cosmos. A story where we did not rise from the mud, but fell from the stars. There are whispers of entire cities buried beneath the ice, not in ruins, but in stasis, intact, preserved by frequency fields that have kept them untouched by time. Spheres of vibration that slow entropy, that responds to emotion, to coherence. And within these cities are not just artifacts, but beings like consciousness preserved, guides waiting in a state of pause. Guardians not sleeping, but watching, awaiting the harmonic signal that says the surface is ready again to know. And this is what is most feared, not invasion, but reintegration, not domination, but evolution. Because to rediscover these cities would mean confronting the illusion of our aloneness, our smallness. It would mean the end of the carefully managed myth that we are separate from the divine, from each other, from the cosmos. It would mean dismantling religions that externalize God, sciences that deny the soul, economies built on lack, education that praises forgetting. Power would shift, not through revolution, okay, but through resonance. This is why access is limited, why satellite data is edited, okay, why whispers are silenced and anomalies buried under bureaucracy, not because there is nothing there, but because what is there cannot be controlled, and control is the currency of a world asleep, but awakening cannot be stopped. It moves in waves, okay, and the frequencies rising now cannot be sealed by ice or treaty or fear. They move through dreams, through synchronicities, through a knowing that grows like light behind the eyes. Some who've seen beneath the veil speak of temples with walls that breathe, symbols that rearrange based on the observer's consciousness, rooms that reveal timelines, archives not of knowledge but of wisdom. It's pulsing light that responds like memory, showing who you've been, what you've forgotten, and why you came back. Others speak of great chambers filled with sound, tones that calibrate the body into coherence, into remembrance, into clarity. And it is here that the greatest fear of the old world takes form, that humanity may heal. And in healing, see, because healing dismantles illusion, okay, it reveals that the true disease was disconnection, and the cure is memory of who we were, who we are, and what still waits for us. Frozen, not in punishment, but in mercy, until we are ready. And ready, we are becoming. The veil is cracking, the ice is thinning, the collective vibration rising, and soon what they fear will not only be known, it will be felt. And once it is felt, it cannot be unfelt. Once it is seen, it cannot be unseen. And what will change is not only history, but identity. We will no longer look up at the stars in search of something beyond, but within, remembering that we are the continuation of a sacred pattern, a frequency that fell into form, and that beneath Antarctica is not the past, but the promise, the blueprint of a healed humanity, held in trust until we could receive it with reverence, not greed. What they fear beneath the ice is what we are becoming, and that fear is the clearest sign that the thaw is not a threat, but a return. There comes a moment in every great cycle when what was hidden must rise, not in violence, but in inevitability, not as a threat, but as a return. The ice has done its work, holding memory like breath beneath the surface, stretched tight with silence. But the breath is exhaling now, slow, certain, divine, and what stirs beneath Antarctica is not just ancient, it is alive, and it is listening. The thaw is not merely a climatic shift, it is a spiritual one, the slow dissolving of a planetary amnesia, the gentle cracking of the great forgetfulness that has shaped our world. This was never just about geography, never just about secrets buried in frozen stone. It was always about us, about a species that fell not from grace, but from remembrance, and the slow climb back into that knowing has brought us here to the edge of ice and time, to the mouth of a mystery that no longer wishes to be held in silence. The structures beneath the snow, the maps etched in forgotten lines, the stories told in dreams and frequencies, they are all converging now. It's calling us inward and downward into the memory we left behind. The reason the ice held so long is because we were not yet ready to see truth without weaponizing it, to touch power without repeating the fall, to open the ancient gates without desecrating them in curiosity and conquest. The earth knew this, and so she wrapped these truths in her oldest cloak. Deep time, deep cold, deep quiet. But now, the pulse has returned. The warmth of consciousness is melting what no sun could ever touch, and the knowing is awakening, not in vaults or laboratories, but in hearts, in dreams, in sudden moments of knowing that stretch across lifetimes. This is not the return of Atlantis, or Lemuria, or any forgotten land by name. This is the return of the remembrance those names carried, the sacred trust that we once lived in harmony with both sky and stone, that we once knew how to listen to the land, to speak with light, to build not for shelter, but for resonance. This is the return of a humanity that does not seek truth as data, but as frequency, as alignment, as home. And what lies beneath Antarctica is not an artifact, it is a mirror. And in that mirror, we see not what we have lost, but what we are still becoming. The myths were never lies. They were memories written in symbol, dreams coded in metaphor, to survive the ages of forgetting. And now, those dreams rise like steam from melting snow, soft at first, then radiant, then undeniable, not only in Antarctica, but everywhere, because the thaw is contagious. It spreads through consciousness, and as more remember, more will awaken, and as more awaken, the veil falls faster, the truth emerges stronger, the illusion collapses quieter, not with thunder, but with light, and there is a gentleness in it, unexpected, as if what waited beneath the ice was not angry, not impatient, but loving, forgiving, grateful, as if it knew we would return one day, bruised perhaps, but ready, as if it waited not just for humanity, but for this version of humanity. It's the one brave enough to feel, to unlearn, to begin again with reverence. And in that beginning, we will remember that the earth is not only ground beneath our feet, but teacher, keeper, guardian. It's Antarctica, her oldest chapter, it's now turning its final page toward the light, what we uncover in the coming days. In the thawing months and shifting years, will not just be structures or symbols. It will be echoes of ourselves, the ones who walked before, the ones who planted wisdom in stone and song, knowing the ice would come, but trusting that we would come again too. And now we do, with softened hearts and awakened spirits, drawn not by force, but by resonance, not by discovery, but by homecoming. So let the ice melt, let the silence lift, let the breath exhale. The time of remembering is here, and what was buried was never lost, only waiting for the warmth of who we would become.